Hello and welcome to the Claret and Blue Podcast. As we recorded this episode, Donyell Malen had not yet signed for Villa, but now he has. Whee! So this episode doesn't feature contract length or transfer fees or wages or anything like that. This is all just about the player, what he's good at, what he's not so good at, and everything in between. I'm delighted to be joined by Carver and Jacob from the BVB Podcast. You might have seen Carver earlier in the year when we signed Ian Matson. Two great lads, really enjoyable chat. I hope you get something out of this as well. Gents, thank you for joining me. It's 10:30 p.m. for me in the UK as I record this, but much earlier in the afternoon for both of you over in the States. How are we, lads?
Doing good. Yeah, thanks for staying up late and having us on.
Carver, we've spoken before when we signed Ian Matson in the summer. We did a piece about his time at Coventry, Burnley and Borussia Dortmund. Good to have you back on the channel, mate. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me again. It's still a little bit bitter that we did not land Matson, but happy to be back either way. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. I'll put the link to all your socials and your podcast in our podcast description if people want to come over and have a look and learn a little bit more about Dortmund. We're here today to talk about Donyell Malen. We had a little bit of a chat before we started. We've heard a little kind of few rumblings about why he's leaving Dortmund and why he's joining Aston Villa, and that he's, I don't want to say he's pushed for a Premier League move, but has been open to it for a long time. So this is more so the player wants to leave rather than Dortmund want to get rid of him because he's crap. Is that fair?
It's kind of a mixed bag, and it's been a complicated few years with Malen, even though it doesn't feel like that. It just feels like kind of he arrived last year, but he's been there for quite a while now. I'll try to be as comprehensive but as concise as I can here. And just so he started at the Arsenal Youth Academy, then he tried to go back to the Netherlands and PSV to get some confidence, to get plenty of goal contributions, which, if you look at his stats across the board, he was phenomenal there. Dortmund originally brought him in for a Jadon Sancho replacement and quickly find out that Malen was not the same type of player really at all. Malen's got some things on Sancho, but for the most part, Sancho has a lot of qualities that Malen doesn't have. Malen is very, very fast. Of course, this pace, I think, is going to be it's going to be utilized under Emery for sure, with the likes of Diaby leaving, I know, too. Leon Bailey, I know you mentioned he has been struggling for the most of his stint at Villa. So, Malen has got some qualities to him with his pace, of course, too, but it's been pretty complicated with Dortmund, given he tried to be the kind of the replacement for Sancho, and then he was kind of a winger, he was kind of a striker, and then back and forth. Still haven't really found the best position with him for Dortmund, and that's kind of been one of the issues, too, of just us really not trying to find a home for him in terms of his position. But it's a interesting saga here, because I know he was also kind of using Dortmund as almost like a stepping stone to get into the likes of Premier League for a quote unquote bigger club, for a new destination.
Carver was pretty offended when I said he might want it. He came as a stepping stone club. It's like, why would you want to leave Dortmund, the best club in the world? No offense to all the Aston Villa fans. And I would say it's definitely been as Carver said, like a complicated, I think, run with him at Dortmund. But at the same time, I think Dortmund's equally been a complicated club. Yeah, we made it to the final of the Champions League. We just lost the Bundesliga title a couple of seasons ago, like on the last day, on decision day. But we've been very inconsistent too. And I think you've seen that in the lineups. Like, I think that's why you see him getting moved around a lot. And then, I mean, maybe that's part of him. Like, he's definitely been what we've been hearing the rumblings of. Like, we haven't heard from his mouth specifically, but he wants to move on to a club in the Premier League. And I know lately there's been a little on the fan side, people have been kind of down on that and like, maybe he has a little bit of an attitude problem. Like, I think what you see on social, like, he has a great relationship with the players. I don't think you see that at all. I think it's just he's been ready to go, and then he's had some inconsistencies. I think he did get a slower start at Dortmund, but at the same time, he was our leading goal scorer last year, where you would, as a winger, which I know you see some wingers kind of lead the team in that way, Mo Salah, for example, but in a team where, like, we've had these target strikers and he's still the one leading the line. So, like, people might want to, like, balk at his lack of consistency, but at the same time, like, he would pull up in moments where we needed him. I remember a handful of games where we just nicked a 1-0 win and it was a Malen goal, or he got the late equalizer to steal us the points. There were a lot of those occasions that I remember too, even if fans were a little more down on him a bit, like he still contributed when we needed him.
I'm always a little bit, I'm not saying that you two are kind of happy to see the back of him, but I'm always a little bit wary when some elements of a fan base are like, oh, well, we've had Villa's pants down, which means like, is that a phrase in the States?
I've not heard that one personally.
Okay, sorry. It means like, how do I explain this? Took advantage of us.
Right.
God. When we signed Morgan Rogers in the January window, Middlesbrough fans where he came from were like, we've had Villa's pants down and they've signed 8 million. He's not worth that. And Morgan Rogers has gone on to be a very good player. So what the opposition thinks of the player doesn't really matter to a certain extent, because it can be a matter of circumstance sometimes. I was going to say exactly what you said, Jacob, that yes, of course, Dortmund got to the Champions League final last season, not even a year ago, but a Dortmund, a bit of a circumstantial, a bit of a club that is of look quite good or they don't look very good. And if a player is kind of struggling in that kind of side, is that the player or is it the club that is part of the problem? You can also kind of extend that a little bit further and just look at that position on the pitch. Tends to be quite a flaky position. You have streaks of running hot and running cold. Is that fair? Is this a streaky player or is that just the role?
I have thought of him as a streaky player. His consistency has probably been his biggest issue. Now he has taken on a bunch of different roles in that front line, yes, but in that first full season, really, he did bag a few goals, but he struggled to bring himself up to the level of the Bundesliga. It's not a huge step up, but it is a step up, compared to the Dutch league. And, he wasn't seeming so sure of himself. And then also, I don't want to call him like a one-trick pony for that first season, but, he would have like one instance of trying to like do a quick step over, get the ball taken from him, and then he wouldn't really track back to press to try to regain possession. And, that was kind of the story of his first season. But once he started to kind of find himself, once he started to have some confidence in himself, the club kind of referred to him as like Malandinho at times with his electric energy. Somehow he found some form to whip in a lot of great crosses too. Surprisingly, that was something that I did not really expect to have in his arsenal. And he was setting up other players. He was scoring lots of goals. I think one of his best qualities, Jacob and I talked about this a lot, is just his shooting ability. I mean, he could be flat-footed, he could be on the half turn, he could be completely with his back to goal, but the way he can get these like slap shots off so quick and with such power and venom is really, really impressive. I have not seen a player like that in quite a while that can, just put that much force behind a strike and, often off balance or just not in the greatest angle either. Somehow he's finding the back of the net. But that's whenever he is on his day and, he's fit and focused.
Yeah, that's something that Villa needs. We get into positions so often where you think, oh, just shoot, take a shot on and see what happens. So
that'll definitely be him for sure.
Somebody who plays on instinct and is just a bit of a wild card in the sense that John Duran is a little bit of like, oh, he'll shoot from anywhere. I think Villa need a bit more of that because you get in good positions, test the goalkeeper sometimes and you never know.
I don't think you see him taking big shots from outside 18, like up in the top corner. It is this really quick, like he can be in a dangerous spot in the box, like Carver said, even back turn. As Carver said, slap shot. I don't know if that translated. Maybe we don't know pants down, but slap shot's very much like a hockey term. Really quick.
Okay, right.
But
snapshot, maybe, I think we might say.
That works, but like in most instances where you wouldn't see a player taking a shot, like he can whip one off, as Carver said, like really powerful. I want to say, like, I don't even remember seeing him like sky anything or put it way over. A lot of times it might just be right at the keeper, but when it's a quick shot like that, again, you're testing the keeper, and I think he can be dangerous in those ways. I know that jumping Bundesliga to Premier League like could be a bit like it might take him a little bit to get settled. I think we even saw that him coming from PSV. Like I said, his first season maybe a little rocky, and you see the inconsistency. I'd say I'm probably way more high on Malen than most Dortmund fans. Like I see the positives and I see like the inconsistency of the team and kind of credit that. Like I'm not one who wants to see him go. Part of that is I think we need to bring in a replacement. I don't know if that's part of our plan at all, but like I still see him as a valuable player. And again, I said it already, but like he came up with goals when we needed it, and he was our top goal scorer last year.
Just to emphasize real quick the shooting here. I mean, you can go back through his catalog at Dortmund. I encourage any Villa fan. You're going to see lots of like strange goals where it is right at the keeper, but somehow the keeper is just not saving it. Like there are, of course, some pretty poor keepers you could find in the Bundesliga or even just like in the Pokal where he scored. But There's also plenty of great keepers he's came across too, where it's just like, it just has so much venom in it that the keeper just can't get a strong hand to it, even if it is within saving distance. So some strange goals here from Malen, just getting these quick shots off with such power.
Let's talk about the top goal scorer thing. We've all touched on it a little bit. I think it was 13 last season, just 3 this year. Is there a reason for that? Can we keep saying that it's a Dortmund thing rather than a Malen thing, or is there any differences in the player himself?
For whatever reason, in these few years from him being at Dortmund, he is almost exclusively scoring in the Hinrunde, or excuse me, the Rückrunde, which is the second half of the season of the Bundesliga. The Hinrunde, right, which is the first half of the season, he has been kind of missing at times or inconsistent, but just for some reason, when the spring hits, that man is on fire. And I think you could attribute that to like, what was it, a year ago, Jacob, he had a kid. And I think that really like boosted his confidence and just his overall happiness. And he was flying last spring with plenty of goals and also just goal contributions in general. So I don't know if that's some sort of like black magic or whatever, but for whatever reason, he is really finding his form whenever the year starts to turn.
Well, that's good for Villa, signing him in January when he's actually good. Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, I guess the goals, I know like 13, that's an okay number. 13 as a winger, it seems pretty decent to me. 13 as the top goal scorer doesn't seem that great. It just seems, I think Dortmund, ever since we sold Haaland, we haven't really found that striker that's really kind of just like taking control as the head scoring figure in the club. Sebastian Haller, obviously he's had a bunch of health issues dealing with testicular cancer, so that didn't work out. We brought Füllkrug in, who's now at West Ham, shortly after that, and it just seems like we haven't figured out how to play with the target striker anymore. We lost one of the best, and we haven't been able to replicate that. And I mean, that does come down to the coaching changes and everything the style changes that we've been dealing with too. And that's why I think you see someone like Malen step up. Like even this year, now we have a really good target striker in Serhou Guirassy, who has been getting plenty of goals, but we're also seeing a number of goals from Jamie Gittins, again, on the wing. He's coming up in these big moments. And it seems like instead of really like working through the game and playing to our target striker, like we're having these moments for wingers or someone else to come up and create like a moment of brilliance to get us the goals.
You're going to find the best Malen, the best version of himself, if you have a system that's suited to him. If you're having either another winger, like I don't know too much about Rodgers, he's a pretty big dude. If he's doing any sort of work off the ball, or if he can carry and the ball progressively through that field and get it up to the final third, that's whenever Malen can really be dangerous. But like the off the ball movement, the pressing is not there, at least what I've seen on a consistent basis. But if you can have him in like a front two with another striker as the target man, or just other players around him as the number 10, or a winger on the other side, do a lot more of the ball progressing, and then get Malen the ball when you get to the end of the middle third into that final third, that's whenever he's going to really start shining a bit more.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a little bit, like, obviously you said he's kind of struggled to find a best position for him. I would expect him to be competing with Leon Bailey on the right-hand side is where I would think he's going to play, without obviously having seen anything yet of him at Villa. Also, all this comes with the caveat of like, he might not be great at pressing or tracking back now, but I would like to think if there's any manager that can sort that out, Unai Emery wouldn't have a plan for him and be able to work on those things. Obviously, we lost Moussa Diaby in the summer and didn't replace him. So it feels like Malen is finally his replacement 6 months later and will compete with Leon Bailey on that right-hand side. But again, interesting that he could play behind the striker or off the striker, because Villa have that kind of versatility in their existing players anyway, that if Malen has to play left wing because all of a sudden Leon Bailey's in form, okay, he can do that. If he needs to rotate with Jacob Ramsey because Morgan Rogers is suspended as he is, or as he was at the moment, well, Malen can come and play number 10 then. So it's good to have that versatility in those options, and it gives Unai Emery different ways to win games, basically, which is what a manager wants.
Yeah, I think the only way you could really go wrong in that front line is just having him as that sole number 9. I think the only time we did that in my memory, Jacob, was in the Pokal against Leipzig, and he was completely invisible. But at the same time, we were already struggling that season, and he was left completely alone up there. So he just needs reinforcements around them to really get him to his best moments.
I thought there was one where he's playing up top for Haaland was out, and he was playing up top, and granted it was a breakaway counter, and he did get a goal. It might have been a different match than I was thinking, but also that is just his pace. I remember him running from like the halfway line and just like walking the ball into the goal because he broke past the keeper, but he's really fast.
He is unbelievably fast. I don't know. I think he's definitely faster than Motson for sure, and I would argue he's probably faster than Bailey too. So he's probably going to be their most pacey player.
That's something that we don't really have. Me and John, our Villa correspondent, spoke about this recently. We've got a few players that you would describe as being pretty quick, but like actual pace that are going to, scare defenders. We don't really have a lot of that. Bodies kind of flying forward is something that Villa will do on the transition. If we're going forward and we've decided to kind of turn it on, we are quick in those moments. So to have Malen kind of running off the shoulder or hugging the touchline or whatever it is an outlet that Villa don't currently have. And it again just allows us to play in a different way. If you had to describe kind of his overall game, is he kind of a touchline hugger? He'll stay wide, or does he want to come inside and shoot? Or what kind of style is it?
I think it's kind of evolved over the past few years because, he came to us as a striker from PSV, and then just with the inconsistencies with our own team, he's been plugged in everywhere, like we mentioned already. But I would say he looks the most comfortable, I would argue, at the moment, like on the right, but tucking into like the half spaces, a little bit more inside, not so central, but also not hugging the touchline either, but just kind of getting in those half spaces in the final third as more on the right. Sometimes in the left too, last year too.
Yeah, you've seen a lot of, I mean, if you watch any Dortmund, our front line has always kind of just rotated and shifted a lot. We have, I would say Malen primarily on the right, Adeyemi on the left. And then even if you go back to the Champions League campaign last year, both those guys are so fast, Adeyemi and Malen. And that's where you see us competing in the Champions League and giving other teams a lot of trouble is just their pace, because guys can't keep up with, you got guys that fast on both sides of the field. We also played so different in the Champions League versus in the Bundesliga, where I think you saw Adeyemi almost as this wing back, but when you have Adeyemi and Malen both very wide and breaking down the lines, it does cause problems. But as far as Malen as a player, he definitely likes to cut inside, like we said, get in the box and get those quick shots off. But you can do a little bit of both.
Let's talk about the players around him a little bit. And obviously this is kind of a Dortmund and a Villa perspective and almost a hypothetical. You want runners around someone who's got pace to make the most of that. Otherwise he's up there on his own away from everybody else, and Villa have that and have that support going forward. If he is playing off the right-hand side and he's not going to press forward and he's not going to track back if he loses possession, the right back that plays behind him, would that be a player that is better suited to be sitting back and kind of cover for his defensive frailties, or somebody that's going to, if he's going to want to cut inside and shoot, someone that's going to bomb on the overlap, which is great for Villa attacking wise. Then you've got a really attacking fullback and Malen who's not willing to track back, and then that right hand side is very exposed. How do you balance that?
I think you're probably looking at more of a defensive minded fullback, and if I'm not wrong, Matty Cash has been your starting fullback for on the right side, right?
We are linked with a new right back this window as well, so that affects the dynamic a little bit.
Yeah. That, or also just some sort of workhorse in midfield too. For as horrible as he has been this season, Emre Can has been that person at times too to put any sort of defensive efforts in whenever we do lose the ball and we're in transition coming back. But that would be my assumption, at least. Whenever him loses the ball, you probably want the more defensive-minded fullback.
Yeah, our current right back, he's been out with some kind of weird illness. We don't even really know what's going on with him. But Rolinson is our primary starting right back, who is a little more defensive. Like he can get up and he can kind of just break off on a run. But that's when you see that happen, you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what Rierson's doing right now, but I love it. But it's not really his characteristic. It's definitely more defensive. So I would say more of a defensive fullback behind him. We have seen a couple glimpses. We also have Jan Couto this year, who was Man City, Girona, Loni before primarily, who is a very kind of attacking fullback, and saw some glimpses. Maybe that could have been when Bayer was in instead of Malen. I can't really pinpoint it, but I think it's definitely more defensive. But if you just love throwing everybody forward, it's exciting if you got another flying fullback behind him too. It's just more chaos, but it's not as defensively strong.
I talked a little bit earlier about almost not being too bothered about what opposition fans, whether they're like, oh, I'm happy to see him go or whatever, because different players can work differently at different clubs. But you mentioned Bayer there, Sahin kind of maybe preferring to play him, a new signing. Is this just one of those transfers that obviously if it works out for Villa and Malen, it kind of works for all parties? Like Dortmund don't really need him or haven't relied on him as much as they did last year. Malen wants the Premier League move. Villa needed an option going forward anyway. It's one of those ones that kind of feels like, everyone's quite happy here, apart from maybe some Dortmund fans.
Yeah, if the price is right, I think so. I mean, this team is desperately needed investment for other areas and departments in this team. I mean, we've had 3 center backs for 3 seasons now, and we now have only a single left back too. The board continues to neglect those areas for whatever reason. It looks like we could potentially be using those funds from Malen to, put more reinforcements into that back line or even central midfield, which is what I'm hoping we do. But I think it's just a matter of like if the price is right, because the market value of Malen was at what we were looking at, like 45 or something like that, at least in the spring, Jacob. And then now we're like hoping to get 25 from him. So, we don't want to have too big of a loss because we spent just over 30 on him a few years back.
It just seems clear that he wants to go, and that's been pretty clear for a while. So with that, people have I think fans have been able to accept or even ready to see the backside of him, because if they want to say he's inconsistent or not, like they're just ready because they're like, if he doesn't want to play for Dortmund, we don't want him here. And if he's not fully in, then he can go. I'd say, Bayer has been getting this start over him, and maybe it plays into his attitude not necessarily being there because he does want this move. Me personally, I also see like Bayer is our backup striker. So if Bayer's starting on the right, then we don't have another striker to come in. Like we're short all over the pitch. We definitely need more defenders too. And so I guess I think if we get rid of Malen, we still need someone else coming in. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. We have a couple of options, but I don't know. We're pretty short everywhere.
One final point to end on. Thank you both for doing this. It's been really good. I'm asking you, I think I asked you this before, Carver, for Maatsen, whether your prediction has come true or not, who knows? He's barely played, but I kind of said something like, what are Villa getting here? What was the next 12 months look like? I'm going to ask you to do the same for Malen, but for this season, we know he loves the springtime, so hopefully he comes in and hits the ground running. But will that happen? Will he be good for Villa? Will he come and maybe invigorate Leon Bailey? Maybe he plays better knowing he's got some competition there as well. Like, if you had to kind of predict how this signing goes, what do you think?
Hey, if the Maatsen one hasn't worked out so far, I'd be happy with a swap. You could take Malen and we'd be
No,
happy.
I like him, but he's just not played much.
Yeah. And he did get an assist recently, Maatsen. I saw that too. But I think it's just going to depend on a few factors. Again, if he has the right personnel around him to help him thrive. I mean, if he's asked to do a lot of the defensive efforts, I think it might be a little bit of a slow start for him. But if he's got players that can progress the ball to do a little bit more of that defensive efforts and just get him the ball in those tight spaces where you might need a shot off, I think he's definitely going to score some goals for you guys for sure. I mean, and especially too, once he gets that first goal, second goal, and the confidence really flows again, you're going to see some Malandinho again.
I want him to come in and just start scoring and going crazy, and all the Dortmund fans to be upset that we let him go.
What is this side of you, Jacob? You have not mentioned.
I think his first year I was very critical of Malen, and then I've been on Malen. I still like him, and maybe it's because everyone else started piling on and hating him. I was like, okay, guys, let's not be too mean. But I would love to see him, just as a former Dortmund player, like go on and score and be great. I think it'll be a slow start though. I think he might be able to score in maybe his first couple of appearances, but then I see it might dip a little bit. If anything, if it does let Leon Bailey kind of get fired up a little more, and that's what I predict the output is going to be. Like maybe you see more from Leon Bailey because there is that competition, but I predict maybe a slower start.
Okay. Well, thank you both for doing it. Jacob, Carver, really, really enjoyed speaking to you both. I'm sure we'll, the way that Villa and Dortmund seem to operate, maybe we'll meet cross paths again another time. You've taught me and hopefully our audience a lot about Donyell Malen. I've taught you the phrase pulling your pants down. So hopefully we've both benefited from this conversation. If you've enjoyed watching along or listening to this podcast, then do let us know in the comment section. Thanks to both the lads for coming to join me. All their information on social media will be in the link in the description if you want to go and find out a little bit more. Cheers lads, and enjoy the rest of your season if you can, or we'll come and nick some more players.